Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning, the last edition for the week on Channels Television, and we're broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. Well, just before we went on that quick break, our conversation was on information communication technology being a major component in the strategic development of the power sector. And I've been having a conversation in the last couple of minutes with two gentlemen, both of them ICT experts, Jude Mgbaka and Fred Agbata. Both of them are still here with me in the studio. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sticking with me.
Thank you.
Well, just before we went on that quick break, Fred, you were talking about how companies should begin to implement core ICT strategies. You also mentioned the fact that that was earlier on in the conversation about a particular company that's actually started to look at smart grid. Why does it seem as if they're not embracing technology to ensure that this reform that we're beginning to see actually goes faster than what we have right now?
Well, I think the risk level actually is a pointer to the fact, because they also want to be careful about how much they throw into the system. For the company that I mentioned earlier, the company actually has a huge and a deep pocket, and they are trying to work out a smart grid that they can actually control from their office in Lagos to a large extent. There will be very few engineers that will be wherever it is situated. So one of the reasons is simply the risk and then the cost of building it afresh. So what the guys are trying to do now, they're trying to first of all see how they can patch and manage what they have on ground now. Let it begin to yield for them. But unfortunately, they still experience issues every now and then. Cable cuts, this happens, that happens, gas issues and everything. So I think that it has to be, they just have to just go all out and see that they make the investment that is necessary. One of the things I think consumers want to see, before we went on break, is the fact they want to see that they're actually paying for what they are using. So one way I think they should start from is to reinvent the metering that was stopped along the way. It was there about 3, 4, 5 years, but all of a sudden they stopped it totally. So I think they should find a way to, if you have people have to pay very minimal cost or get it for free, they should find a way to let people have those meters. So people are stepping out of their house, they are removing their car, they are paying for what they are using. That's a smart number. But the truth of the matter is that there are smarter meters. There are smarter meters. What they have now, the card one, where you just remove the card and it works. There are smarter ones where just log onto the internet and all the lights in your home were put off.
Yeah, because, we have a lot of Nigerians have this very annoying habit of leaving their houses and leaving the lights on. And just like Governor Babatunde Raji Fashola actually said yesterday, that's the first step. The first step is beginning to understand that you should change that culture, that when you're leaving your house, you must take off, turn off all the lights in the house, make sure that all the electrical appliances that are not in use are actually turned off. That's the best way for you to begin to conserve your electricity and ensure that you're not overspending. And at the end of the day, when they bring the bill, but where did I get this bill from? Forgetting that you actually left all your electrical appliances on. And so it began to eat into the power supply that you actually paid for. But now, there's this argument that ICT can actually be used to secure transmission lines. How true is this? Is this not going to be a misdeployment of sorts?
Okay. One key thing that can be done about that is remote monitoring.
Okay. So,
like I said earlier on, if I'm in this location and I can see all the nodes that connect the network that we are monitoring, right? When one goes off, that means the moment vandals or people who want to take advantage of remote connections touch the cable or do anything that makes the cable change in its behavior, I just know what is going on, and then quick response can be taken. So it's like essentially, you see you have a bird eye view on the whole infrastructure from a remote location. So you may have people, say for example, you have that kind of view here in Lagos, and then you have infrastructures here, somewhere in Osun State. You may have people close by who you can easily just call up and say, look at what is happening in this area. Will you guys go and check out what is going on there? The form, when people even know that this kind of infrastructure is in place, they become careful about trying to take advantage of such remote connections, because they know there's people behave differently when they know they're being watched.
Yeah, true.
So essentially, when you talk smart grid, it goes beyond just having good management of consumption of power. It also helps you to ensure that the whole connections are safe.
That's
the network is
including
safe.
your gas pipelines as well.
Exactly.
So transmission and gas pipelines.
Exactly.
So now what about in terms of monitoring? How can ICT actually help limit losses of electricity being consumed?
In line with what he said, if you install those security nodes along those transmission line, you will be alerted at each point there is a security breach. In addition to that, we can begin to think, because we are in a very unique environment, we can begin to think about also installing solar-powered CCTV cameras on along those transmission lines. Yes, it might not be perfect, but it will also add to reviewing what is happening. That would enable the owners of the new owners of the company to understand what is going on along their transmission lines wherever they are. So those are some of the ways that ICT can actually help in monitoring electricity in those areas.
Add to the question you asked about monitoring consumption, and then of course you mentioned the fact that people leave their lights on. This is a behavior that has grown over the years. I mean, we use light to know when there's power supply. You understand? So we leave it on, and then we used to know, oh yeah, there's power now. So the thing is, if you have a meter like I have in my house, for example, now that is a little bit smart.
A little bit.
A little bit smart, because I can tell how I use power over a period of a month. So when people around me are efficient enough to turn off power and then turn off the freezer when we don't need it, we find out that the power supply is low. So people will be controlled by the structure you put in place. There's really nowhere in the world where people naturally behave well. It is structure and system that make people behave well. So if you put the kind of meter that people can actually, on a day-to-day basis, and see, oh, I have 25 units left. Now, all lights should go off. You understand? They will naturally behave differently because it means that they are seeing the benefit of their behavior. When you're asked to behave in a particular way, the first thing you ask yourself is, why? Why are you telling me to now all of a sudden become so conscious about whether my light is on or off? So with the consumption thing, because there's a lot of wastage going on. I've been in a debate where we're talking about what should the government do about power supply. And then someone said, we should first of all minimize wastage. And somebody said, why should we minimize wastage where they are not even supplying enough? Let them supply enough first before we start talking about wastage. So we need to control these things and then ensure that people can relate the change of behavior to some form of benefit. And then we will manage wastage to a reasonable extent.
Okay. Well, okay, I was just going to ask, these days we have a lot of cloud computing. Everybody does cloud computing. Everybody stores their documents in the cloud, some form of clouds or the other. Now, can cloud computing, help in effectively tackling peak electricity demand, for instance?
Okay, I think the word cloud computing is interesting in this case, because what cloud computing essentially means is taking the power of the computing system into a remote location, and then all the power goes there. So there's you have different definitions for cloud computing, but essentially infrastructures can be put in place to ensure that there's an improvement on the power systems. Now let me just go into this. What is going on in places like the US and the likes is the fact that the smart grid, for example, will be intelligent enough to allow for multiple sources of power input.
Okay.
So, for example, if in my home I have solar panels, all right, so I generate some form of power for myself. If I'm traveling, right, I could leave that on and it will feed into the grid and I get paid.
Okay, so in other words, you are making money for yourself on the side.
Yes. So, in fact, it's already happening in instances where you have somebody generating power at home. So sometimes he turns off all his light and then feed the power into the grid. But for that to happen, ICT has a major role to play. For example, if I'm using windmill, and in some cases, the power supply from my windmill will be low, depending on the strength of the wind around my neighborhood at that time, the grid should be smart enough to know whether to switch it off or on. It will calculate the power coming from my source and then say, okay, this power is good enough for this kind of things, and then it will allow it to flow through. All this will be managed automatically by the kind of infrastructure you just talked about. We call it cloud computing, call it an IT infrastructure.
I think what most people who operate the cloud computing infrastructure have done is that they've also added other forms of electricity generation, power generation to their infrastructure. So you have, for example, Facebook that has multiple data centers all over. It has windmill on one hand. It has all sorts, trying to promote green energy, you know, with what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we need to start looking at that as well. So when you say cloud computing, it actually simply means that somebody somewhere has a data center where you can go and store your information. Some people think that cloud computing is something in the cloud. Actually, it's still a physical structure that actually needs the electricity. But what then happens is that it becomes more efficient use of electricity. But I think I also want to make a point that a lot of Nigerians, one of the things that we can do, I see still people still using these clandestine bulbs that are 60 watts. We need to begin to think about changing into energy efficient bulbs, because it's very simple. If you generate power and then you waste power, it's still the same thing. So when people turn on everything, they're wasting power. So people must have that habit of conserving power at all times.
Build them as they use.
And just like you said, build them as they use.
Build them
also,
as they use. So
for those people who are also good at saving power, create incentives for them.
Exactly.
That would help, because we must give ICT a human face and a human
Then again,
touch.
there should be different charges for peak period and off-peak period. These are like kind of things that you use to regulate people's behavior. If you tell me that when it's 2 o'clock, I will pay so amount per unit, and then when it's 8 o'clock in the night, I'll pay so amount per
And
unit.
the only way you can achieve this is if you have
Smart
software.
metering. Smart metering, yes.
And remember the telcos in their heydays, that's what they did. They had off-peak and peak
Yes,
periods,
yes.
and it worked for them at that period in time. So with a good smart grid, with a good software, you can actually on the back end handle that seamlessly. You don't have to switch anything. And when it's off-peak, it goes when it's, it builds at that
You know,
appropriate time.
why we're discussing this essentially is because we're trying to make this thing happen fast, soon enough. Because essentially the private sector doesn't have a choice. This is the way to go. It's not about whether it should be done or it should not be done. We're just talking about how soon it should be done, really. You don't have a choice. This is the way it should go. Because when we talk about privatization, essentially it's going to become possible for new players to come in. It may not look like that now. It may look like, Nigerians are complaining that some few people have taken over. They have not. Just relax. Over time, you'll find out that some people will be able to come in also. And then, because without competition, there's nothing like privatization.
Of course, and that will also improve the value chain.
But even beyond that, the beauty of getting power right, which I believe this is a very good step in the right direction, is the fact that our GDP, whether a lot of people will say, okay, it doesn't affect the federal government. I agree. But it will cost $1 trillion. I mean, just imagine what will happen if Nigeria gets power right. People, small businesses, it will change a lot. So I think that this is the best thing that we can do, but it's just to sensitize those in that industry to understand the importance of using ICT to make things happen quicker.
Well, Fred and Jude, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. It's been an interesting conversation. Most of the messages, they didn't come in. So I'm hoping that if they do come in, I'll forward them straight to you and so you can answer them. But thank you for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you
so much.
Well, I've been speaking to ICT experts, 2 ICT experts, that is, Fred Agbata and Jude Mgbaka, and we've been looking at the information communication technology as being a major component in the strategic development of the power sector. But we're hoping to be joined now by our correspondent, Temple Ashaju, who is joining us live from the Nigerian Stock Exchange to give us a feel of the mood this morning at the market. Hello, Temple, and could you just quickly run us through what's happening at the market at the moment? Yesterday, the market actually finished bearish, but what's the mood this morning?
Thanks, Harriet. The mood this morning so far looks very flat. The difference in the all-share index is just by 0.01% so far, and we have seen some of the stocks that were on the losers chart yesterday still on the losers chart, talking about the likes of University Press Limited, that's UPL, and that's topped the losers chart yesterday, and we still have it right now on that chart. We also have First Bank PLC on the losers angle at the moment, except for the likes of Diamond Loan, which is currently on the gainers list. And I think the sentiment towards that stock at the moment is because of the Q1 result that it released yesterday, which is helping to now boost the confidence of investors towards that particular stock.
Well, Temple, you've mentioned some key stocks that we really should be on the lookout for, but you haven't talked about, let's just, talk a little about Nestle and Nigerian Breweries. Now, Nestle was on the gainers list for yesterday, and Nigerian Breweries was on the losers list. Are both stocks still maintaining status quo?
it looks like Nestle will continue to maintain that status quo because of the launch of its new products, the new Maggi chicken that it's launched yesterday. And of course, the shareholders and investors that are actually loyal to their stocks seem to be pushing more pushing more investments towards that stock of in recent times. And I want to believe that that will still continue to be sustained till the new product that was launched, gets well popular in the market, especially among the consumers. And then for Nigerian breweries, of course, that's declared. They declared a good dividend of 4 naira 50 kobo, and I think it is the sell pressure on that stock at the moment that is giving it the reason to be on the losers chart. However, we expect that things will change very soon. Sentiments toward Nigerian breweries will turn around to take a new turn as per reinvesting into that stock.
Well, thank you so much, Temple. We'll check up with you again later in the day to get more on those figures. But that's Business Morning for today and for the week. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Harriet Agbinyi. Up next is News Track.